Hello guys and welcome back to another video. In this video I will be talking about scouting. In this video I'll just be showing a game between Slam and ACCM, comparing their scouting styles and then talking about different scouting styles and the pros and cons of each of them. Another thing I'll also be talking about is deer luring and when to lure deer. There's some tips I think that can help you determine like when is the best time to lure deer in a game. So let's just get right into the game. One thing I'm going to be doing for future videos is I'm going to try to talk a little bit slower. I've heard that some of the viewers are from non-native English-speaking countries, and that if like sometimes I talk a little bit too fast, and it's difficult for people to understand the first time through. So for all you native English speakers, hopefully you can still bear with me and you can still understand what I'm saying. But I've taken some notes before these videos, so hopefully things are a little bit more concise, but I'm still doing these as live takes. So yeah. Anyways, looking at Slam's scouting pattern, you can see that he scouts in a semicircle fashion right around his base. This is because he's at the edge of the map, so there's no way for him to scout this area here. And looking at ACCM, you can see that he is kind of closer to the center of the map. So his scouting fashion is completely circular. There's no semicircle involved at all because he's too far from the edge. And you'll see that he continues this scouting pattern around the base. One thing you'll notice is both players scouted the front of their base first. Slam basically because he had to. Whenever you're at the edge of the map like Slam is, you almost always scout the front of your base first because there's really nothing in the back of your base, right? I think one of the pros for scouting in a circular fashion is that it's very balanced. You know, you have equal amount of vision of your front as you do your back, which can be helpful. Um, it can just be helpful. I mean, you'll understand what's in the back of your base. So if you have to play defensive, then you can just go to the back resources. Another thing is that when you scout in the circular fashion, usually you find your back resources by the time you need to put like a lumber camp down or something. So you'll always have like a good first lumber camp. You know, had he scouted the front first, he may have not seen this lumber camp and may have put a lumber camp in the front first. But yeah, we'll talk about that too, because sometimes putting a lumber camp in the front isn't always the worst thing in the world. So we'll talk about that. But so yeah, the pros of this is just you have a very balanced scouting, and there's a good chance that you're going to find your sheep overall because you're so thorough with the scouting here. I mean, he's just so thorough, right? Eventually, he's going to probably find his sheep. The only thing that I would say as a con for this is that you don't really scout the front of your base as much as you could. And if you have sheep that are farther away in the front of your base, or you just don't scout, you just miss the front, or you just miss the sheep out front by a couple tiles, well, then the enemy, if they get, if they decide to do like a strategy, a scout strategy where they just come to your base right away to look for a boar or whatever, and they pick up on your sheep early on, then obviously that's going to be a disadvantage for you. And if you have a really bad map, realizing that you have a lot of forward resources, you probably want to scout your enemy more. Here in this case, ACCM, you can see he scouted so much of his own base, which is okay because his map is decent, right? He has a backwood, back gold. But had he had forward resources, right, forward wood, forward gold, um, he would probably not want to pick this scouting pattern because you can see that if he's got a bad map, he's going to want to play more aggressive, right? And at this point, he did a really good job scouting, so I think it still worked out for him. But in some situations, you know, if his sheep had been over here, right, he probably would have still been scouting. And if he had a bad map, then he wouldn't get enough scouting information on his opponent in order to make good decisions later on. So yeah. Anyways, let's look at Slam here. And Slam, you can see, is pushing deer. So I'm gonna pause for a second, and we're gonna talk about deer pushing a little bit later. I kind of want to go over the other two strategies before I continue here because ACCM is starting to scout for Slam, and that's something a strategy on its own that I want to talk about. So hopefully you guys can bear with me in the pause here, but two other strategies I wanted to talk about with scouting is a scouting strategy where you scout the front of your base first, and then a strategy where you scout the back of your base first. So we've already talked about where you scout in a circular fashion, right? But let's talk about when you scout the front of your base first. So by scouting the front of your base first, I mean you simply scout, you bring your scout around the front, and then maybe you backtrack and go around the front here, like kind of like so, right? The back kind of remains mostly unexplored, right? So the pros of scouting the front of your base first, is that if you have any forward resources like sheep or boars, you're going to find them probably pretty quickly. I mean, you're going to find them. If you scout just like a circular fashion and the sheeps are out here, well, it'd probably take you one or two laps around your base in order to find them. And at that time, the enemy might have already come by and taken your sheep, right? So scouting the front of your base can be really important in terms of making sure that you're not getting lamed resources, right? Especially in team games where players basically know where the other opponent's at. They have a better general idea. Obviously, in a 1v1, the players could be, ACCM for Slam could be here, he could be here, he could be here, he could be here, right? He could be in a lot of different positions, right? So he doesn't exactly know where he's at, and he could be a lot closer than he thinks. So scouting, so when if you were to try to play like aggressive with your scout, right, it wouldn't really pay off as much because hold up, let me rethink what I'm saying right now. The thing is, like in a team game, you know basically where they're at. So when you play aggressive with your scout, it's a lot easier to find sheep and boar. In a 1v1, you don't know where they're at. So playing aggressive, like straight up aggressive with your scout, like going to the opponent right away, just isn't usually as good because it could take you quite a while to find them. And by that time, they might have already found all their resources and you'll still have not found your own. So um, that's just kind of the con there. But again, so like in like a team game, it's probably best to scout the front first because players that play very aggressive with their scout will easily be able to find your sheep or boar forward if you don't scout the front first. So that's one place where I definitely recommend that you scout the front pretty thoroughly before you start scouting in the back. Um, so, and the other thing is that one of the cons, I guess, for scouting the front first is obviously you might miss out on having like a backwood, right? If, like we said with ACCM, right? Had he scouted the front first, he may have not seen this wood line here, and then he would have put a lumber camp here, which obviously is probably not as safe as this one. But there are some reasons why putting a lumber camp here isn't the worst. And I guess I can kind of talk about that now, but yeah. So in a lot of situations, you're going to build two lumber camps anyways, right? And really in this, with ACCM's map, it comes down to, do you build a lumber camp here on the front or do you build a lumber camp on the back here with this other wood? Obviously, there's kind of, you can kind of justify both cases. You could say here it's more safe, it's in the back of your base. But at the same time, you could say it's also not as safe because they're in the same area. So if somebody comes here with the army, they can hit off all of your wood at once, right? And then the opposite's true here. It's maybe not as safe to towers and maybe not as safe overall, but at least if you split the wood lines, you can always have some sort of wood income, right? So that's kind of the justification here. The other justification is that some people actually put lumber camps, if they realize they have a backwood and a forward wood, right? They'll put the lumber camp on the forward wood first because they can start chopping into the wood. And if the other player goes for a drush or a man at arms, then the wood will have been chopped enough to where they can easily like put palisades around the villagers and wall them in quickly and easily. So that's another justification I've heard for putting lumber camps out front first. But again, yeah, if you scout the front first, then you're really kind of you really don't know what's going on in the back, so you might be missing like a good lumber camp placement, right? So that's one of the cons to scouting forward. All right, so now we've covered the standard scouting and we've covered scouting in the front first, right? Now let's talk about scouting in the back. So if you scout the back of your base, I'll tell you that when I was thinking over this, I really couldn't think of any justifications to why you would scout the back first. Again, if you scout the back first, you'll find good places to put wood if there are any, right? But the problem is again, if you don't scout the front first and the enemy plays aggressive with their scout, then they can take your sheep or boar or whatever, pretty quickly, and that's going to hurt you early on. The other thing is if you scout the back first and you find your sheep, usually you want to use your sheep to scout areas that you haven't scouted. And so if you've scouted the back, then you're using the sheep to scout the front. And if you're using the sheep to scout the front, then again they can get taken by the enemy scout. I mean, oppositely, if you scout the front first, then usually you're using the sheep to scout the back, right? And so they're less likely to get caught by the um, enemy scout, right? So I couldn't really find any justifications to why you'd really want to scout the back first. I guess in situations where you're playing maybe a water map, scouting the back could maybe be beneficial because you want to find a good place to dock, right? But other than that, I can't, like on Arabia, I just really can't think of a reason why you'd want to scout the back of your base first. So if you guys can think of any kind of justification to that, then leave me a comment in the comment section and let me know. But I really couldn't think of anything. So yeah. Anyways, let's move on to the next part. Let me just flip the page here. So let's talk about a custom scouting strategy. So one that kind of takes the best of all types of the strategies here. So I think that out of the three strategies you talked about, the standard, the front scout, and the back scout, I think um, I'd say probably the safest one is probably to scout the front first to make sure that you don't lose any sheep or boar on the front. I just think that the standard scouting, while it's good and it's thorough, I think that when you combine it you combine 1v1s with team games, I think just in general, I think scouting in the front is better, especially like in team games. I can't tell you every time that I have basically decided to scout like in a standard scouting fashion, I've always lost sheep in team games. Like people always take them, and every time that I decide to scout forward, I always find the sheep, and I always find on sheep. So if you're the pocket, obviously you're not really going to be that worried about people stealing your sheep. So going for a more standard scout would probably be better. I'll tell you the one thing about standard scout is a little bit more efficient, like space wise. You don't like if you scout the front first, sometimes you might have like a really weirdly scouted map. It'll be kind of unbalanced. It won't be circular. It'll be like some weird shape, right? So I think standard scouting gives you more efficient scouting. But I think just you want to find the sheep and boar. So I think that's really important. So I would say definitely scout the front first. And then what I would say is if you've found six sheeps, I mean, for all the scouting things, you want to find the four sheeps first, right? Should be like that should be you know pretty easy to understand. But I would say that if you find like a boar or two sheeps in the front, I think that's enough. That's enough scout. Like you can use the sheeps to scout to find the rest of your resources, or at least try to find the rest of your resources. And knowing where you have one boar is really important because obviously that's going to be a big food source for a majority of the feudal age. If you're playing a rated game, I would probably say after you found six sheep, if you are trying, to be as, maybe efficient as possible in the Dark Age, I would probably, after I found the six sheep, I would probably go and try to scout the enemy map, the other opponent, right, and try to steal their sheeps. Because if you get some of their sheeps or you get a boar, I mean that's one less one for them. At this point, you should already have six sheep, and you should have the location of one boar. Which, by the way, if the boar is forward, I'd recommend that you lure it sooner rather than later. That way they can't take it, right? Because then if you're able to take two sheep or a boar or whatever, right? Them being short food is going to limit the amount of strategies that they can do, right? If you're short like a boar or short some sheeps, right? Doing strategies like drush flush or man at arms really aren't as viable because like like some of them you can still do, but they're really tough on your economy, so they're just not very good. Or either that, or you're going to be able to getting up to feudal age really late. So I don't know if you guys have tried drush flush before, but if you ever try drush flush and you lost a boar or you lost sheep, you'll realize that it's very difficult to get up on a pop like 28 pop. And I'll tell you, if you go up on like a pop like 30 pop and the other player plays really aggressive, which they can because they stole your resources, right? They have extra food. If they play really aggressive and you get up late, that could be a recipe for disaster for you guys who lost the sheep. So um, I definitely think that it's really important that you find your resources. And then again, if you're playing competitively and you're really trying to win these games, I think that just I think it's really good to see if you can steal like a sheep or a boar or whatever, right? And picking like a boar or two sheep or whatever, I think that'd give you a nice advantage in the game. So, anyways, let's talk about right now. I guess now that we're talking about going to look for the enemy, let's talk about uh, let's talk about what to look for when you're going to look for the enemy. So I see a lot of people, let's switch over to ACCM's point of view here. So I see a lot of people scouting and they don't really know what they're doing with their scout. I have to admit that sometimes when I'm scouting, when I go to look for the enemy, sometimes my scout just goes into la la land and kind of ends up in the corner, right? I think a lot of lower level players make that same mistake. But as a higher level player and as somebody that's going to be working on scouting a lot, right? Players should learn to know what to look for when they're scouting. So here are my tips for improving your scouting and finding the enemy. So the first thing is to know the resources. So each player is given 2 gold mines of 4 tiles and a gold mine of 7 tiles in a standard Arabia match. They're also given a 4 stone tile mine and a 5 stone tile mine, right? The one thing is that there is an extra 4 stone tile mine on the map. So just seeing a 4 stone tile mine isn't a clear indicator that the opponent's there. But I mean, there's a 50-50 chance that it is. So it's important that when you do find resources, when you see like stone or whatever, scout it fully to see whether or not it's a 5 or a 4, right? Or if it's a gold mine, make sure you scout it all the way to know if it's make sure you know it's a 4 or a 7 and not a 3, right? Because if you just scout one tile and you see gold there, that doesn't really tell you a lot. It could mean that they're there, or it could mean that you're not even close. Because usually, like the 3 tile mines aren't very close to the opponents, from what I've seen. And yeah, usually the 7. I think I'm not sure if in all situations, but I think the 7 gold mines are actually um, the closest to the town center. So even making sure that it's not a 4 and that it's a 7, right? That'll give you even more information. So that kind of covers it for the gold mines and the stone mines. The other thing is relics and wolves. Again, relics are usually a decent distance away from the town center, right? They're not very close. And the same with wolves. Wolves are usually very far away from the town centers. So if you're around wolves or relics, then you know you're not in the general area, right? So just kind of get away from where you're at and try to go somewhere else, right? So that's it for those two. And then the last thing, which I think is really important, is wow, I didn't even realize he's missing 3 sheeps. Um, the last thing, which is the most important, is elevation. So elevation, a lot of people don't think about this, but the town center is always going to be on the lowest elevation in standard Arabia maps, and maybe even just standard RM in general. It's going to be on the lowest elevation. So you can see here that this is the lowest elevation. There's a hill here, right? And there's a hill here. I think the elevation, it's like 7 tiles or something from the TC is like the soonest that it can actually rise. But this is actually really helpful because if we are scouting, right, and we see like a big hill that's really, really steep, there's a good indication that the town center could be right around the corner, like right next to it. Because if the town center has to be on the lowest elevation and the map generates a town center next to like a really big hill, well, then the hill basically has to force its way downward like very, very steeply. So a lot of times you might see like these types of maps where there's a town center in the middle and then all around the town center there's these really steep hills. And that's because I think the town center just gets placed in a location with high elevation and then it just forces the elevation to low elevation. I'm not exactly sure how the map script works, but I think that's the case. And so anyways, when you're near a hill that like kind of wraps around like in a circle or just gets very like is a very steep hill, there's a good chance that the town center could be really nearby. That could be really close. So my tip is to stick to the hills, right? Stick to the hills and stick to the resources. Because if you stick to the hills and you stick to the resources, you're not gonna be within range of the town centers, right? Too many times I see people running like if you were scouting here in this area, right? This would not be a good area to scout in. I know the town center's not here, but the problem is that if you start running through this area here, right, you're on 0 elevation, right? And the town center could just as easily be right here as it is here, right? And that wouldn't be good. Obviously, running your scout into the town center and losing it is really bad. So stick to the elevation, stick to the hills, stick to the resources, stick to the edge of the map, right? The town center is usually a few tiles away from the edge of the map as well. So um, the way I would go about it is if I were ACCM here, I would, I would just kind of stick around these hills. And if I saw a wood line here, I'd probably just kind of sit around the edge of the map and see if I could find any other wood lines, see how the hills kind of ride. And that'll just help you avoid the town center. So yeah, let me just look and make sure. Yeah, so I guess that kind of just covers this, but yeah, just stick to the resources, stick to the hills, and you'll be safe. So yeah. Um, Once you've scouted the enemy's base, if you did employ like a strategy, like I said, where you find your 6 sheep and a boar and then go to see if you can steal resources, then I would just scout the front of their base and then probably go back and try to find the rest of your resources before the enemy does, right? I think that if you're able to take the sheep, the good thing is if you take the sheep and they are one of those players that they don't go forward until they find all their resources, then what'll happen is they're just going to keep looking for their resources and they're going to be down the sheep. And so they're going to have wasted all this time. I mean, sure, they're going to have a really good scout on their own map, but the problem is that they're still short the resources from the sheep or the boar or whatever, right? And they're just wasting a lot of scouting information trying to find it. So if they have like a really bad map, right? Well, they're going to have a really good vision of their bad map. But the problem is if they have a bad map, they want to play aggressive. And if they want to play aggressive, then they shouldn't be scouting their base this much, right? So, so stealing the sheep is important. But anyways, if you haven't found the rest of your resources and you went to scout them, then I would say scout the front of their base, right? Try to figure out where the front is and scout that, and then go back and look for your resources, right? That way you have a decent eco as well. I mean, a lot of times you'll probably figure out that you can't find the resources, but when you can, it's really nice. So, yeah. All right, so that kind of just leads us to, I think, our final point here. So for you guys that have stuck with me, hopefully you've learned something. I know a lot of it people are already familiar with, and they probably could have thought of it themselves, but just want to make sure that people kind of just want to reiterate things. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was pushing deer. So if you guys watch Slam a lot, you'll see that he's somebody that pushes deer a lot. Like he pushes deer almost every single game in Arabia. And so I just kind of want to talk about that because it was something that for a long time I didn't really understand why he does it. And maybe I still don't understand why he does it, but at least I can kind of think of some justifications for why he does it. So anyways, when you're scouting your map, uh, there's no guarantee that you're going to find all your sheep. I mean, honestly, your sheep could be in really bad places where you're just not going to scout. You know, whether or not that's because the wood lines were weird and you just had like a weird, like in here, like you can't always just like always scout out every nook and cranny in your map, right? It just takes too much time, right? So hopefully, you find all your resources, but in cases like this, like you could see here, Slam doesn't have sheep, right? And so he might be thinking like ACCM might have taken them or whatever, right? And there's no point for him though, again, to scout out his whole map, especially like I guess this is a good map for him, but if you had a bad map, again, you don't want to be spending all the time scouting your own base, right? And then not finding sheep and then having a bad map and having to try to play aggressive with a really bad eco, right? Because if you're down 2 sheep and you try to play man at arms, well, your eco sucks, first of all, because you're missing horse collar probably. And like you're not going to be able to make that many man at arms, right? So it's just going to be like bad eco plus, you know, like a strategy that doesn't really work with a bad eco equals like very bad strategy, you know? But anyways, the deer, when they're close like this, like you're not guaranteed the sheep, but you can always push the deer in, right? And just think, people always say, you're wasting scouting time pushing the deer. Well, again, if he's never going to find the sheep, like in this situation, he's never going to get these sheep, right? He doesn't know that obviously, but I think in general you can just assume that at some point, like you know, you might just never find your sheep. So like you're really not wasting scouting time because you're never going to get them anyways, right? So you might as well push the deer, and by pushing like at least 2 deer here, if you're missing 2 sheep and you push two deer, that's basically it's gonna like actually be better like food eco wise because you gather the deer faster plus there's more food. But like if you push the 2 deer, that's going to give you like that versatility back where you're going to be able to do more strategies. Because again, you can't do like drush flush very effectively or man at arms very effectively when you are missing sheeps or boars or whatever. So pushing the deers will kind of even the score a little bit, right? And allow you to it'll kind of give you back those options for the strategies. So I would say that in situations where you have the deer close, I would probably as long as you had scouted majority of the front of your base first, I would probably push the deer in right after that, right? Because then you're going to have the eco to do any strategy you want pretty much, right? Whereas if you were to just like think about it this way. Think about like you were going to try to find the sheep no matter what. Well, Slam would have kept scouting here, and by the time he realizes he doesn't have the sheep, he's like, "Oh, I have a weak eco, I'm gonna go push the deer. Well, now at that point, he goes in here, pushes the deer. Well, by the time these deer are pushed in, it's gonna be like 8 minutes. This other guy's already gonna be up. He's not gonna have any scouting information on him. If Slam has a bad map, he's gonna want to play aggressive, right? But he can't play aggressive because he doesn't have any scouting information, right? So if you have a good deer like this and you scout at the front of your base, push the deer right after, right? As long as you haven't found the sheep, right? And um, I think that after you push the deer, then you can go look for the opponent, right? But I would definitely push for him. So let's see what Slam does here. I know you guys are probably bored out of your minds now that I paused the game for that long. If you stuck with me, good on you. But again, pushing the deer is just about giving you back the strategies that you couldn't do without the sheep, right? It'll be interesting to actually see what Slam's strategy is here. He has 4 on wood, so he's probably going for man-at-arms. But again, he can't do man-at-arms if he doesn't push these deer. It'll be interesting to see if he pushes another one, though, because he doesn't have any scouting information now on ACCM, so if he's going for man-at-arms, he really needs to get the scouting information. The other thing is, isn't this boar pretty late? I think this boar is really late as well. Let's speed it up. So now Slam's going to go look for ACCM, and he's luring in the boar. I think the boar is late. I'm not sure, though. He's got the barracks going up. He's going to go for man-at-arms probably, maybe. I don't know what he's going for. Actually, he could be going for scouts as well. Slam's got a back gold, and woods are back as well. So see Slam, he's going up, he's on the hill. He should know he's safe up here, right? He's gonna check the gold. How many gold? 4 gold. All right, so he knows that he's probably in this general area right here, this kind of triangle shaped area, right? And if you look at the map, yeah, he's right over here, right? So he knows he's in the area. He's gonna follow the hills, right? He's not gonna go on the flats. He's just gonna follow the hills, right? Follow the hills. You can kind of see the hill gets flat here. He probably is thinking maybe it's over here, right? Because it just suddenly gets all flat over here. He's gonna follow the wood line. Okay, now he sees the house, right? Follow the wood line. Follow the wood line. He was thinking about it. Follow the wood line, right? Follow the stone, right? Now he's getting a really good idea. He sees where the mill's at, right? If the mill was on this side, I mean, like usually people put the mills facing their town center as well. Not all the time, but a lot of times they do. So like the mill here gives them a good indication that TC is probably right in here. And what do we see it? TC's not here. It's right over here. But it gives you kind of a decent. Maybe it's not a good indication at all. I don't know. Anyways, he's gonna scouting out here. I think Slam is actually like, let's see. He's going to miss the barracks, which is unfortunate. Again, pushing the deer kind of costs him a little bit here. He's not going to be able to see exactly what ACCM's doing here, right? And I think, is ACCM going for man-at-arms? Yeah. So he's going to miss the barracks, right? He doesn't have the scouting information yet for it, right? So it's kind of unfortunate for him. Slam's going for man-at-arms as well, right? But because he pushed the deer, he can make this he can have a decent eco, right? I mean, it's not going to be as bad. He's missing 3 sheep, right? So already it's not going to be that great. But now he's going to go hunt these other deer. So it was fortunate for him that he had other deer that were kind of close as well to keep his eco up in good shape. But yeah. Anyways, let me just kind of look through my notes real quick and just make sure I covered everything here. Yeah, so I guess I think the main idea, I guess, of this video, if I want to sum it up, is that it's important to scout your base first. I think in general, you should scout the front of your base first, right? Find resources so that your enemy can't lame you, right? And then if you scout the front of your base first and you find like a lot of your resource, if you find all your sheep out front and all your boars, not even all your boars, if you find 1 boar and all your sheep out front, use the sheep to scout, then go forward, try to lame sheep or whatever, right? And if you haven't found all the sheep at your base at that point, then you can come back and try to look for them. Otherwise, if after you scouted quite a bit, if you still can't find them, then you can try to push a deer quickly, but don't overcommit to looking for the deer, or don't overcommit to looking for the sheep, especially if you have deer nearby, because A lot of times, they might take your deer, they might take your sheep, and you're never gonna find them, right? So again, you're just better off pushing the deer, and then you'll be in better shape. So let's see how Slam's doing here. So here, Slam's taking off the deer, so that's not good for him, right? His eco's gonna be kind of hurting right now at this point. He's going back on the deer again. Kind of sucks for Slam too. He's got a hill here, so he's gonna lose a bill. Oh no. Good micro by Slam. He's got the archers up. He's going archers, yeah. So anyways, hopefully you guys understand what I was trying to say. I know it can be difficult to maybe understand exactly what I'm saying, but I guess the last thing I want to say was, yeah, just don't get too excessive with the deer pushing, right? If you push 4 deer in, if you push 4 deer in, your eco is going to be fine. But the thing is that if you have a bad map and you need to play aggressive, right, and you push 4 deer, you're not going to have any scouting information of the opponent, right? You're not going to know what they're doing, and that's going to weaken your ability to do damage with your aggressive strategy, right? Going in blind is not a good idea. If you have a really good map and you want to play for like a more conservative strategy, like scouts or something, like say you have back gold, back wood, you could easily wall to your TC if needed, something like that, and you have 4 deer. Well, then in that situation, you could just push the deer, right? Because your map is easily defensible, so it doesn't really even matter if you scouted them or not. Obviously, you're gonna want to scout them eventually, but if you wanted to push 4 deer at that point, then it wouldn't really make a difference because you've already committed to going for a more like passive slash defensive strategy, right? So, yeah, so hopefully that kind of covers everything. And I made notes for this video, so hopefully it was a little bit more organized than past videos, but it can be kind of difficult to explain things on the spot. So I apologize if it wasn't the best explained video ever. But anyways, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.